It'll move.
Got to rearrange.
Hey, everybody.
New camera. Where are we in it?
I think I want to keep the screen, but the camera is elsewhere.
Yeah, we should look at the camera.
Peggy, good to be with you. Star, if anybody's joining in later at a different time, we're just commenting on the really remarkable star or planets that were lining up beside each other tonight. Caught a glimpse of it earlier. Tried to drive out from the lights, and I had some conversation about I was reading out of Mark 13 today, and we were talking some about the end times, and like I was talking about C.S. Lewis and the way he writes books, and we were going to mention that Lewis was, sometimes we like to think, Lewis wrote these allegories. His stories were these pure metaphors for like exactly who God is and how he operates, and actually Lewis himself has said that that wasn't necessarily his intention to do that. I mean, clearly there are pictures of Christ and some imaginings of the ideas, but that he wanted people who weren't familiar, right, with the Bible,
right.
to pick up a story and see truths in the Bible.
That's right.
And so,
but even if they hadn't read the Bible, like he was trying to communicate the reality of our story and how it points to Jesus in this fantasy, right? Like, his intention wasn't to write some Christian book. It was to write, like, wait a minute, no other story makes sense. And here's another one that makes sense. In light of wait, we need to be saved. From ourselves. Actually, it turns out, and this book points that out too. Right.
Exactly.
It's kind of neat.
All
of and you'll read ultimately, like, he wrote, it's kind of fascinating because he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia first, or the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was written first. And so there's lots of folks who clamor over which one to read first, and I think you can start there, but he intended to fill this back in. So, whatever pattern or whatever order you want to read, we started with The Magician's Nephew.
We did. Here we go.
Chronologically, it precedes. So we're thankful you joined us. Let's see if I can figure this out.
Getting closer to you right now.
We might have to move like this way unless we're like I'm gonna put you in the crowd. I can move the camera to you again. So. And then once I do, you guys start reading. We're gonna.
Sorry, I'm a more fidgety person, so I'll probably be moving anyway.
I don't want to take you out of the picture.
Oh gosh.
You gotta come over this way.
Okay. I'm gonna.
Oh no, she's
I'm happy to be close. I can feel the twist in my spine.
All right, I made more room.
Oh, this is perfect. Okay.
Yeah, I made more room.
Okay, we'll get to the reading. Y'all are kind to hang with us. And of all things, chapter 10 is the first joke. And other matters.
We were just joking.
All right, let's go. So we had ended with the lion speaking, and we heard him speaking to Narnia. Narnia, 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 awake, love, think, speak, be walking trees, be talking beasts, be divine waters. And chapter 10 begins. It was, of course, the lion's voice. The children had long felt sure that he could speak, yet it was a lovely and terrible shock when he did. Out of the trees, wild people stepped forth, gods and goddesses of the wood. With them came fauns and satyrs and dwarves. Did I say that right? Satyrs, obviously. Is that how you all would say that? All right. Out of the river rose the river god with his naiad daughters. All these and all the beasts and birds in their different voices, low or high or thick or clear, replied, "Hail, Aslan, we hear and obey. We are awake, we love, we think, we speak, we know." "But please, we don't know very much yet," said a nosy and snorty kind of voice. And that really did make the children jump, for it was the cab horse who had spoken. "Good old Strawberry," said Polly. "I am glad he was one of the ones picked out to be a talking beast." And the cabbie, who was now standing beside the said, "Strike me pink. I always did say that it would offset a lot of sense, though." "Creatures, I give you yourselves," said the strong, happy voice of Aslan. "I give to you forever this land of Narnia. I give you the woods, the fruits, the rivers. I give you the stars, and I give you myself. The dumb beasts, whom I have not chosen, are yours also. Treat them gently and cherish them, but do not go back to their ways, lest you cease to be talking beasts. For out of them you were taken, and into them you can return. Do not." "No, Aslan, we won't," said everyone. But one perky jackdaw added in a loud voice, "No fear," and everyone else had finished just before he said it, so that his words came out quite clear in a dead silence. And perhaps you have found out how awful that can be, say, at a party. The jackdaw became so embarrassed that it hid its head under its wing as if it were going to sleep. And all the other animals began making various queer noises, which, of course, no one has ever heard in our world. They tried at first to repress it, but Aslan said, "Laugh and fear not, creatures. Now that you are no longer dumb and witless, you need not always be grave. For jokes as well as justice come in with speech." Wow, what a line.
Mm-hmm.
So they all let them go, and there was such merriment that the jackdaw himself plucked up courage again and perched on the cow horse's head between its ears, clapping its wings, and said, Aslan, have I made the first joke? Will everybody be told how I made the first joke?" "No, little friend," said the lion. "You have not made the first joke. You have only been the first joke." And everyone laughed more than ever. But the jackdaw didn't mind as loud till the horse shook its head and the jackdaw lost its balance and fell off, but remembered its wings. They were still new to it before it reached the ground. "And now," said Aslan, "Narnia is established. We must next take thought for keeping it safe. I will call some of you to my council. Come hither to me, you the chief dwarf, and you the river god, and you oak, and the owl, and both the ravens and the bull elephant. We must talk together. For though the world is not 5 hours old, an evil has already entered it." The creatures he had named came forward, and he turned away eastward with them. The others all began talking, saying things like, "What did he say had entered the world? An evil? What's an evil? No, he didn't say an evil, he said a weevil. Well, what's that?" "Look here," said Diggory to Polly. "I've got to go after him. Aslan, I mean the lion. I must speak to him." "Do you think we can?" said Polly. "I wouldn't dare." "I've got to," said Diggory. "It's about Mother. If anyone could give me something that would do her good, it would be him." "I'll come along with you," said the cabbie. "I like the looks of him, and I don't reckon these other beasts will go for us. And I want a word with old Strawberry." So all three of them stepped out boldly, or as boldly as they could, toward the assembly of animals. The creatures were so busy talking to one another and making friends that they didn't notice the three humans until they were very close. Nor did they hear Uncle Andrew, who was standing trembling in his buttoned boots a good way off and shouting, but by no means at the top of his voice. Diggory, come back! Come back at once. When you're told, I forbid you to go a step further. When at last they were right in among the animals all stopped talking and stared at them. Well, said the he-beaver at last, what in the name of Aslan are these? Please, began Diggory in rather a breathless voice when a rabbit said, they're a kind of large lettuce, that's my belief. No, we're not. Honestly, we're not, said Polly hastily. We're not at all nice to eat. There, said the mole, they can talk. Who ever heard of a talking lettuce? Perhaps they're the second joke, suggested the jackdaw. A panther, which had been washing its face, stopped for a moment to say, well, if they are one, they're nothing like so good as the first one. At least, I don't see anything very funny about them. It yawned and went on with its wash. Oh, please, said Diggory. I'm in such a hurry. I want to see the lion. All this time, the cabby had been trying to catch Strawberry. Now he did. Now, Strawberry, old boy, he said, you know me. You ain't going to stand there and say as you don't know me. What? Voices? Well, said Strawberry very slowly, I don't exactly know. I think most of us don't know much about anything yet. But I have a sort of idea I've seen a thing like this before. I have a feeling I've lived somewhere else, or was something else, before Aslan woke us all up a few minutes ago. It's all very muddled, like a dream. But there were things like these three in the dream. What, said the cabby, not know me? Me, what used to bring you a hot mash of an evening when you was out of sorts? Me, what rubbed you down proper? Me, what never forgot to put your cloth on you if you was standing in the cold? I wouldn't have thought it of you, Strawberry. It does begin to come back, said the horse thoughtfully. Yes, let me think now, let me think. Yes, you used to tie a horrid black thing behind me and then hit me to make me run. And where I ran, this black thing would always be coming rattle-tattle behind me. We had our living to earn, see, said the cabby. Yours is the same as mine. And if there hadn't been no work and no whip, there'd have been no stable, no hay, no mash, and no oats. For you did get a taste of oats when I could afford 'em, which no one can deny. Oats, said the horse, pricking up his ears. Yes, I remember something about that. Yes, I remember more and more. You were always sitting up somewhere behind, and I was always running in front, pulling you in the black thing. I know I did all the work. Summer, I grant you, said the cabby, or worked for you and a cool seat for me. I worked for you and a cool seat for me. But what about winter, old boy, when you was keeping yourself warm and I was sitting up there with my feet like ice and my nose fair pinched off me with the wind and my hands that numb I could hardly hold the reins? It was a hard, cruel country, said Strawberry. There was no grass, all hard stones. True, mate. Mate, true, said the cabby. A hard world it was. I always did say those paving stones were fair on any oss. That's London. Oh, that's London, that is. I didn't like it no more than what you did. You were a country oss, and I was a country man. Used to sing in the choir, I did, down at home. But there wasn't a living for me there. Oh, please, said Diggory, could we get on? The lion's getting further and further away, and I do want to speak to him so dreadfully badly. Look here, said Strawberry. Look here, Strawberry, said the cabby. These young gentlemen has something on his mind, and he wants to talk to the lion about him, you call it, Aslan. Suppose you was to let him ride on your back, which you'd take it very kindly, and trot him over to where the lion is. I mean, the little girl will be following along. Ride, said Strawberry. Oh, I remember now. That means sitting on my back. I remember there used to be a little one of you two-leggers that used to do that long ago. He used to have a little hard, square lumps of some white stuff he gave me. It tasted, oh, wonderful, sweeter than grass. That'd be sugar, said the cabby. Please, Strawberry, begged Diggory, do let me get up and take me to Aslan. Well, I don't mind, said the horse. Not for once in a way. Up you get. Good old Strawberry, said the cabby. Here, young'un, I'll give you a lift. Diggory was soon on Strawberry's back and quite comfortable, for he had ridden bareback before on his own pony. You want to pick up?
Sure.
So delightful. Imagine how much fun he had writing this. Like, was he like chuckling to himself?
Thing. Yeah, for sure. And his brother who's typing it.
Right.
Now doogie up, Strawberry, he said. You don't happen to have a bit of that white stuff about you, I suppose, said the horse. No, I'm afraid I haven't, said Diggory. Well, it can't be helped, said Strawberry, and off they went. At that moment, a large bulldog, who had been sniffing and staring very hard, said, Look, isn't there another of any of these queer creatures over there beside the river under the trees? Then all the animals looked and saw Uncle Andrew, standing very still among the rhododendrons and hoping he wouldn't be noticed. Come on, said several voices. Let's go and find out. So while Strawberry was briskly trotting away with Diggory in one direction, and Polly and the cabbie were following on foot, most of the creatures rushed toward Uncle Andrew with roars, barks, grunts, and various noises of cheerful interest. We must now go what the whole scene had looked like from Uncle Andrew's point of view. It had not made at all the same impression on him as on the cabbie and the children. For what you see and hear depends a good deal on where you are standing. It also depends on what sort of person you are. Ever since the animals had first appeared, Uncle Andrew had been shrinking further and further back into the thicket. He watched them very hard, of course, but he wasn't really interested in seeing what they were doing, only in seeing whether they were going to make a rush at him. Like the witch, he was dreadfully practical. He didn't notice that Aslan was choosing one pair out of every kind of beast. All he saw, or thought he saw, was a lot of dangerous wild animals walking vaguely about. And he kept on wondering why the other animals didn't run away from the big lion. When the great moment came and the beast spoke, he missed the whole point, for a rather interesting reason. When the lion had first began singing long ago when it was still quite dark, he had realized that the noise was a song, and he had disliked the song very much. It made him think and feel things he did not want to think and feel. And then when the sun rose and he saw that the singer was a lion, only a lion, he said to himself. He tried his hardest to make believe that it wasn't singing and never had been singing, only roaring as any lion might do in a zoo in our own world. Of course it can't really have been singing, he thought. I must have imagined it. I've been letting my nerves get out of order. Who ever heard of a lion singing? And the longer and more beautiful the lion sang, the harder Uncle Andrew tried to make himself believe that he could hear nothing but roaring. Now, the trouble about trying to make yourself stupider than you really are is that you very often succeed. Uncle Andrew did. He soon did hear nothing but roaring in Aslan's song. Soon he couldn't have heard anything else, even if he had wanted to. And when at last the lion spoke and said, Narnia, awake, he didn't hear any words. He heard only a snarl. And when the beast spoke in answer, he heard only barkings, growlings, bayings, and howlings. And when they laughed, well, you can imagine. That was worse for Uncle Andrew than anything that had happened yet. Such a horrid, bloodthirsty din of hungry and angry brutes he had never heard in his life. Then, to his utter rage and horror, he saw the other three humans actually walking out into the open to meet the animals. The fools, he said to himself. Now those brutes will eat the rings along with the children, and I'll never be able to get home again. What a selfish little boy that Diggory is. And the others are just as bad. If they want to throw away their own lives, well, that's their business. Well, what about me? They don't seem to think of that. No one thinks of me. Finally, when a whole crowd of animals came rushing toward him, he turned and ran for his life. And now anyone could see that the air of that young world was really doing the old good. In London, he had been far too old to run. Now he ran at a speed which would have made him certain to win the 100 yards race at any prep school in England. His coattails flying out behind him were a fine sight. But of course it was no use. Many of the animals behind him were swift ones. It was the first run they had ever taken in their lives, and they were all longing to use their new muscles. After him, they shouted. Perhaps he's that Neville. Tally-ho! Tantivy, cut him off, round him up, keep it up, hurrah! In a very few minutes, some of them got ahead of him. They lined up in a row and barred away. Others hemmed him in from behind. Wherever he looked, he saw terrors. Antlers of great elks. The huge face of an elephant towered over him. Heavy, serious-minded bears and boars grunted behind him. Cool-looking leopards and panthers with sarcastic faces, as he thought, stared at him and waved their tails. What struck him most of all was the number of open mouths. The animals had really opened their mouths to pant. He thought they opened their mouths to eat him. Uncle Andrew stood trembling and swaying this way and that. He had never liked animals at the best of times, being usually rather afraid of them. And of course, years of doing cruel experiments on animals made him hate and fear them far more. Now, sir, said the bulldog in his businesslike way, are you animal, vegetable, or mineral? That was what it really said. But all Uncle Andrew heard.
Wow,
Lewis was kind. He didn't write about him wetting his pants or anything like that.
It's such a striking truth, though, that we get to where we can't even hear the truth. Like altered. It's so altered in the way we're framing.
Well, we do that with each other.
I mean, right.
Yeah.
Quite striking.
Yeah. Not even animal voices that it takes. I've already decided what I'm hearing. I'm already decided what they're going to say. It's really.
I hear that happen sometimes.
Very, very striking. Yeah. Diggory and his uncle are both in trouble.
Uh-oh.
Chapter 11. You may think the animals were very stupid not to see at once. Bella.
That's our animal. Trying to make sure.
Wonder what she's saying.
Stupid humans.
Yeah. You may think the animals were very stupid not to see at once that Uncle Andrew was the same kind of creature as the two children in the cabby. But you must remember that the animals knew nothing about clothes. They thought that Polly's frock and Diggory's Norfolk suit and the cabby's bowler hat were as much a parts of them as their own fur and feathers. They wouldn't have known even that those three were all of the same kind if they hadn't. And if Strawberry had not seemed to think so. And Uncle Andrew was a great deal taller than the children and a good deal thinner than the cabby. He was all in black except for his white waistcoat, not very white by now, and the of his hair, now very wild indeed, didn't look to them like anything they had seen in the other three humans. So it was only natural that they should be puzzled. Worst of all, he didn't seem to be able to talk. He had tried to, when the bulldog spoke to him, or as he thought, first snarled and then growled at him. He held out his shaking hand and gasped, "Good doggy, then poor old fellow." But the beast could not understand him any more than he could understand them. They didn't hear any words, only a vague sizzling noise. Perhaps it was just as well they didn't, for no dog that I ever knew, least of all a talking dog of Narnia, likes being called a good dog man, any more than you would like being called my little man. Then Uncle Andrew dropped down in the dead faint. "There," said a warthog. "It's only a tree. I always thought so." Remember, they had never yet seen a faint or even a fall. The bulldog, who had been sniffing Uncle Andrew all over, raised his head. "It's a wild animal. Probably the same kind as those other ones." "I don't see that," said one of the bears. "An animal just wouldn't just roll over like that. We're animals and we don't roll over. We stand up like this." He rose to his hind legs, took a step backwards, tripped over a low branch, and then fell flat on his back. "The third joke, the third joke, the third joke," said the jackdaw in great excitement. "I still think it's sort of a tree," said the warthog. "If it's a tree," said the other bear, "there might be a bee's nest in it." "I'm sure it's not a tree," said the badger. "I had a sort of idea I was trying to speak before it toppled over. That was only the wind and its branches, said the warthog. You surely don't mean, said the jackdaw to the badger, that you think it's a talking animal? It didn't say any words. And yet you know, said the elephant. The she-elephant, of course. Her husband, as you remember, had been called away by Aslan.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you know it might be an animal of some kind. Mightn't the whitish lump at the end be sort of a face? And be eyes and a mouth? No nose, of course. But then, one mustn't be narrow-minded. Very few of us have what could exactly be called a nose. Not like the elephant. She squinted down the length of her own trunk with a pardonable pride. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog. The elephant is quite right, said the taker.
That's funny.
I tell you what, said the donkey brightly. Perhaps it's an animal that can't talk, but thinks it can. Can it be made to stand up, said the elephant. She took the limp form of Uncle Andrew gently in her trunk and set him up on end, upside down, unfortunately, so that 2 half-sovereigns, 3 half-crowns, and a sixpence fell out of his pocket. But it was no use. Uncle Andrew merely collapsed again. There, said several voices. It isn't an animal at all. It's not alive. Tell you it's an animal, said the bulldog. Smell it for yourself. Smelling isn't everything, said the elephant. Why, said the bulldog. If a fella can't trust his nose, what's he to trust? Well, his brains, perhaps, she said mildly. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog. Well, we must do something about it, said the elephant, because it may be the evil, and it must be shown to Aslan. What do most of us think? Is it an animal or something of a tree kind? Tree, tree, said a dozen voices. Very well, said the elephant. Then if it is a tree, it wants to be planted. We must dig a hole. The 2 moles settled that part of the business pretty quickly. There was some dispute as to which way was up for Uncle Andrew, which way up Uncle Andrew ought to be put into the hole, and he had a very narrow escape from being put in head foremost. Several animals said his legs must be his branches, and therefore the gray fluffy thing, they meant his head, must be his root. But then others said that the forked end of him was the muddier, and that it spread out more, as roots ought to do. So finally he was planted right way up. When they had patted down the earth, it came up above his knees. Looks dreadfully withered, said the donkey. Of course, it wants some watering, said the elephant. I think I might say, meaning no offense to any present, that perhaps, for that sort of work, my kind of nose. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog. But the elephant walked quietly to the river, filled her trunk with water, and came back to attend Uncle Andrew. The sagacious animal went on doing this till gallons of water had been squirted over him, and water was running out of the skirts of his frock coat as if he had been in a bath with all his clothes on. In the end, it revived him. He awoke from his faint. What awakening it was! But we must leave him to think over his wicked deed, if he was likely to do anything so sensible and turn to more important things. You pick up.
Again, how much fun with that?
I know. Still just thinking of it.
Strawberry trotted on with Diggory on his back, so the noise of the other animals died away, and now the little group of Aslan and his chosen counselors was quite close. Diggory knew that he couldn't possibly break in on so solemn a meeting, but there was no need to do so. At a word from Aslan, the he-elephant, the ravens, and all the rest of them drew aside. Diggory slipped off the horse and found himself face to face with Aslan. And Aslan was bigger and more beautiful and more brightly golden and more terrible than he had thought. He dared not look into the great eyes. Please, Mr. Aslan, said Diggory, may I, please, will you give me some magic fruit of this country to make mother well? He had been desperately hoping that the lion would say yes. He had been horribly afraid it might say no. But he was taken back when it did neither. This is the boy, said Aslan, looking not at Diggory but at his counselors. This is the boy who did it. Oh dear, thought Diggory, what have I done now? Son of Adam, said the lion. There is an evil witch abroad in my new land of Narnia. This is how she came here. A dozen different things that he might say flashed through Diggory's mind. He had the sense to say nothing except the exact truth. I brought her, Aslan, he answered in a low voice. For what purpose? I wanted to get her out of my own world back into her own. I thought I was taking her back to her own place. How came she to be in your world, son of Adam? By magic? The lion said nothing, and Diggory knew that he had not told enough. It was my uncle, Aslan, he said. He sent us out of our own world by magic rings. At least I had to go because he sent Polly first, and then we met the witch in a place called Charn, and she just held on to us when... You met the witch, said Aslan in a low voice, which had the threat of a growl in it. She woke up, said Diggory wretchedly, and then, turning very white, I woke her because I wanted to know what would happen if I struck a bell. Polly didn't want to. It wasn't her fault. I fought her. I knew I shouldn't have. I think I was a bit enchanted by the writing under the bell. Do you? Asked Aslan, still speaking very low and deep. No, said Diggory. I see now I wasn't. I was only pretending. There was a long pause, and Diggory was thinking all the time. I spoiled every chance of getting anything from Mother now. When the lion spoke again, it was not to Diggory. You see, friends, he said, that before the new clean world I gave you is 7 hours old, a force of evil has already entered it, waked and brought hither by the son of Adam. The beasts, even Strawberry, all turned their eyes on Diggory till he felt that he wished the ground would swallow him up. But do not be cast down, said Aslan, still speaking to the beasts. Evil will come of that evil, but it is still a long way off, and I will see to it that the worst falls upon myself. In the meantime, let us take such order that for many hundred years yet this shall be a merry land and a merry world. And as Adam's race has done the harm, Adam's race shall help to heal it. Draw near, you other two. The last words were spoken to Polly and the cabby who had now arrived. Polly, all eyes and mouth, was staring at Aslan and holding the cabby's hand rather tightly. The cabby gave one glance to the lion and took off his bowler hat. No one had yet seen him without it. When it was off, he looked younger and nicer and more like a countryman and less like a London cabman. Son, said Aslan to the cabby, I have known you long. Do you know me? Well, no, sir, said the cabby. At least the way is not in the ordinary manner of speaking. Yet I feel somehow, if I may make so free, as how we've met before. It is well, said the lion. You know better than you think you know, and you shall live to know me better yet. How does this land please you? It's a fair treat, sir, said the cabby. Would you like to live here always? Well, you see, sir, I'm a married man, said the cabby. It's my wife was here, and neither of us would ever want to go back to London, I reckon. We're both country folks, really. Aslan threw up his shaggy head, opened his mouth, and uttered a long, single note. Not very loud, but full of power. Polly's heart jumped in her body when she heard it. She felt sure that it was a call, and that anyone who heard that call would want to obey it, and, what's more, would be able to obey it, however many worlds and ages lay between. And so, though she was filled with wonder, she was not really astonished or shocked when all of a sudden a young woman with a kind, honest face stepped out of nowhere and stood beside her. Polly knew at once that it was the cabby's wife, fetched out of our world, not by any tiresome magic rings, but quickly, simply, and sweetly as a bird flies to its nest. The young woman had apparently been in the middle of a washing day, for she wore an apron, her sleeves were rolled up to the elbow, and there were soap suds in her hands. If she had had time to put on her good clothes, her best hat had imitation cherries on it, she would have looked dreadful. As it was, she looked rather nice. Of course, she thought she was dreaming. That was why she didn't rush across to her husband and ask him what on earth had happened to them both. But when she looked at the lion, she didn't feel quite so sure it was a dream. Yet for some reason, she did not appear to be very frightened. Then she dropped a little half curtsy, as some country girls still knew how to do in those days. After that, she went and put her hand in the cabbie's and stood there looking around her a little shyly. "My children," said Aslan, fixing his eyes on both of them, "you are to be the first king and queen of Narnia." The cabbie opened his mouth in astonishment, and his wife turned very red. "You shall rule and name all these creatures and do justice and protect them from their enemies when enemies arise. And enemies will arise, for there is an evil witch in this world." The cabbie swallowed hard 2 or 3 times and cleared his throat. "Begging your pardon, sir," he said, "and thanking you very much, I'm sure, which my missus does the same, but I ain't no sort of chap for a job like that. I never had much education, you see." "Well," said Aslan, "can you use a spade and a plow and raise food out of the earth?" "Yes, sir, I can do a bit of that sort of work, being brought up to it, like." "Can you rule these creatures kindly and fairly, remembering that they are not slaves like the dumb beasts of the world you were born in, but talking beasts and free subjects?" "I see that, sir," replied the cabbie. "I try to do the square thing by them all." "And would you bring up your children and grandchildren to do the same?" "It'd be up to me to try, sir. I'd do my best. Wouldn't we, Nellie?" "And you wouldn't have favorites either among your own children or among the other creatures, or let any hold another under, hardly." "I never could abide such going on, sir, and that's the truth. I'd give 'em what for if I caught 'em at it," said the cabbie. All through this conversation, his voice was growing slower and richer, more like the country voice he must have had as a boy, and less like the sharp, quick voice of a Cockney. "And if enemies come against the land, for enemies will arise, and there was war, would you be the first in the charge and the last in the retreat?" "Well, sir," said the cabbie very slowly, "a chap don't exactly know till he's been tried. I dare say I might turn out e'er such often. Never did no fighting except with my fists. I'd try, that is, I'd hope I'd try to do my bit." "Then," said Aslan, "you will have done all that a king should do. Your coronation will be held presently, and you and your children and grandchildren shall be blessed. And some will be kings of Narnia, and others will be kings of Archenland, which lies yonder over the southern mountains. And you, little daughter," here he turned to Polly, "are welcome. Have you forgiven the boy for the violence he did you in the Hall of Images and the desolate palace of accursed charm?" "Yes, Aslan, we've made it up," said Polly. "That is well," said Aslan. "And now for the boy himself." Whew. So good.
It is. What do you say? I mean, yeah, getting to chapter 12 and you don't want the story to end.
Right. Right. Yeah. What you can start.
Chapter 12 is Strawberry's adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Diggory kept his mouth very tight shut. He had been growing more and more uncomfortable. He hoped that whatever happened, he wouldn't blub or do anything ridiculous. That makes the next line so much even more appropriate, right?
Yeah.
He hoped he wouldn't blub or do anything ridiculous. "Son of Adam," said Aslan, "are you ready to undo the wrong that you have done to my sweet country of Narnia on the very day of its birth?" "Well, I don't see what I can do," said Diggory. "You see, the queen ran away, and I asked Are you ready? Said the lion. Yes, said Diggory. He had had for a second some wild idea of saying, I'll try to help you if you promise to help my mother. But he realized in time that the lion was not at all the sort of person one could try to make bargains with. But when he had said yes, he thought of his mother, and he thought of the great hopes he had had, and how they were all dying away. And a lump came in his throat, and tears in his eyes, and he But please, please, can't you give me something that will cure my mother? Up till then, he had been looking at the lion's great feet and the huge claws on them. Now, in his despair, he looked up at its face. What he saw surprised him as much as anything in his whole life. It's hard. This is not allegory. This is true. For the tawny face was bent down near his own, and, wonder of wonders, great shining tears stood in the lion's eyes. They were such big, bright tears compared to Diggory's own that for a moment he felt as if the lion must really be sorrier about his mother than he was himself. My son, said Aslan. I know grief is great. Only you and I in this land know that yet. Let us be good to one another, but I have to think of hundreds of years in the life of Narnia. The witch whom you have brought into this world will come back to Narnia again, but it need not be yet. It is my wish to plant in Narnia a tree that she will not dare to approach, and that tree will protect Narnia from her for many years. So this land shall have a long, bright morning before any clouds come over the sun. You must get me the seed from which that tree is to grow. Yes, sir, said Diggory. He didn't know how it was to be done, but he felt quite sure now that he would be able to do it. The lion drew a deep breath, stooped its head even lower, and gave him a lion's kiss. And at once Diggory felt that new strength and courage had gone into him. Dear son, said Aslan, I will tell you what you must do. Turn and look to the west and tell me, what do you see? I see terribly big mountains, Aslan, said Diggory. I see this river coming down cliffs in a waterfall, and beyond the cliff there are high green with forests, and beyond those there are higher ranges that look almost black. And then far away there are big snowy mountains all heaped up together like pictures of the Alps. And behind those there's nothing but the sky. You see well, said the lion. Now the land of Narnia ends where the waterfall comes down. And once you have reached the top of the cliffs, you will be out of Narnia and into the western wild. You must journey through those mountains till you find a green valley with a blue lake in it, walled round by mountains of ice. At the end of the lake, there is a steep green hill. On the top of that hill, there is a garden, and in the center of that garden is a tree. Pluck an apple from that tree and bring it back to me. Yes, sir, said Diggory again. He hadn't the least idea of how he was to climb the cliff and find his way among all the mountains, but he didn't like to say that for fear it would sound like making excuses. But he did say, I hope, Aslan, you're not in a hurry. I shan't be able to get there and back very quickly. Little son of Adam, you shall have help, said Aslan. He then turned to the horse, who had been standing quietly beside them all this time, swishing his tail to keep the flies off, and listening with his head on one side of the conversation, as if the conversation were a little difficult to understand. Interesting.
Mhm.
right? Because he's already having to bat the flies off.
Oh.
So there is evil in the land.
Mhm.
It's not totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
My dear, said Aslan to the horse, would you like to be a winged horse? You should have seen how the horse shook its mane and how its nostrils widened, and the little tap it gave the ground with one back hoof. Clearly, it would very much like to be a winged horse. But it only said, if you wish, Aslan. If you really mean, I mean, I don't know why it should be me. I'm not a very clever horse.
Mhm.
Be winged. Be the father of all flying horses, roared Aslan in a voice that shook the ground. Your name is Fledge.
Gosh, it's so
You read?
Sure. The horse shied just as it might have shied in the old miserable days in a pool to handsome. Then it roared. It strained its neck back as if there were a fly biting its shoulders, and it wanted to scratch them. And then, just as the beast had burst out of the earth, there burst out from the shoulders of Fledge wings that spread and grew, larger than eagles, larger than swans, larger than angels' wings in church windows. The feathers shone chestnut color and copper color. He gave a great sweep with them and leaped into the air. 20 feet above Aslan and Diggory, he snorted, neighed, and curveted. Then, after circling once round them, he dropped to the earth, all four hoofs together, looking awkward and surprised, but extremely pleased. Is it good, Fledge? Said Aslan. It is very good, Aslan, said Fledge. Oh, that's the first time I've heard that line in the creation of the world.
Yeah,
it was good.
It was very good. So neat. Yeah, him. You know, he's not. He was strawberry to the man, but to Aslan, he's calling him who he is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like he's not changing it from strawberry. He's calling him Fledge.
Yeah.
He's calling him who he is.
Will you carry this little son of Adam on your back to the mountain valley I spoke of? What? Now at once? Said Strawberry, or Fledge, as we must now call him. Hurrah! Come on, little one. I've had things like you on my back before, long, long ago, when there were green fields and sugar. What about the two daughters of Eve whispering about, said Aslan, turning very suddenly on Polly and the caddy's wife, who had in fact been making friends. If you please, sir, said Queen Helen, for that is what Nellie the cabman's wife now was. I think the little girl would love to go too, if it weren't no trouble. What does Fledge say about that? Asked the lion. Oh, I don't mind too, not when they're little ones, said Fledge, but I hope the elephant doesn't want to come as well. Fourth joke, huh?
Yeah.
The elephant had no such wish, and the new king of Narnia helped both the children up. That is, he gave Diggory a rough heave and set Polly as gently and daintily on the horse's back as if she were made of china and might break. There they are, Strawberry. Fledge, I should say. This is a rum go. Do not fly too high, said Aslan. Do not try to go over the tops of the great ice mountains. Look out for the valleys, the green places, and fly through them. There will always be a way through. And now, be gone with my blessing. Oh, Fledge, leaning forward to pat the horse's glossy neck. This is fun. Hold on to me tight, Polly. Then the next moment, the country dropped away beneath them and whirled round as Fledge, like a huge pigeon, circled once or twice before setting off on his long westward flight. Looking down, Polly could hardly see the king and the queen, and even Aslan himself was only a bright yellow spot on the green grass. Soon, the wind was in their faces, and Fledge's wings settled down to a steady beat. All Narnia, many-colored with lawns and rocks and heather and different sorts of trees, lay spread out below them, the river winding through it like a ribbon of quicksilver. They could already see over the tops of the low hills which lay northward on their right. Beyond those hills, the great moorland sloped gently up and up to the horizon. On their left, the mountains were much higher, but every now and then There was a gap when you could see, between the steep pine woods, a glimpse of the southern lands that lay beyond them, looking blue and far away. That'll be where Archenland is, said Polly. Yes, but look ahead, said Diggory. For now, a great barrier of cliffs rose before them, and they were almost dazzled by the sunlight on the great waterfall by which the river roars and sparkles down into Narnia itself from the high western lands in which it rises. They were flying so high already that the thunder of those falls could only just be heard as a small, thin sound, but they were not yet high enough to fly over the top of the cliffs. We'll have to do a bit of zigzagging here, said Fledge. Hold on tight. He began flying to and fro, getting higher at each turn. The air grew colder, and they heard the call of eagles far below them. I say, look back, look behind, said Polly. There they could see the whole valley of Narnia stretched out to where, just before the eastern horizon, there was a gleam of the sea. And now they were so high that they could see tiny-looking, jagged mountains appearing beyond the northwest moors, and plains that looked like sand far in the south. I wish we had someone to tell us what all those places are, said Diggory. I don't suppose they're anywhere yet, said Polly. I mean, there's no one there and nothing happening. The world only began today. No, but people will get there, said Diggory. And then they'll have history, you know. Well, it's a jolly good thing they have it now, said Polly, because nobody can be made to learn it. Battles and dates and all that rot. Now they were over the top of the cliffs. And in a few minutes, the valley land of Narnia had sunk out of sight behind them. They were flying over a wild country of steep hills and dark forests, still following the course of the river. The really big mountains loomed ahead. But the sun was now in the travelers' eyes, and they couldn't see things very clearly in that direction. The sun sank lower and lower till the western sky was all like one great furnace full of melted gold. And it set at last behind a jagged peak which stood up against the brightness, as sharp and flat as if it were cut out of cardboard. It's none too warm up here, said Polly. My wings are beginning to ache, said Fledge. There's no sign of the valley with a lake in it, like what Aslan said. What about coming down and looking out for... We shan't reach that place tonight. Yes, and surely it's about time for supper, said Diggory. And lower, as they came down nearer to the earth and among the hills, warmer, and after traveling so many hours and nothing to listen to but things, it was nice to hear the homely and earthly noises again, the chatter of the river on its stony bed and the creaking of trees in the light wind. A warm, good smell of sun-baked earth and grass and flowers came up to them. At last, Fledge alighted. Diggory rolled off and helped Polly to dismount. Both were glad to stretch their stiff legs. The valley in which they had come down was in the heart of the mountains. Snowy heights, one of them looking rose red in the reflections of the sunset, towered above them. I am hungry, said Diggory. Well, tuck in, said Fledge, taking a big mouthful of grass. Then he raised his head, still chewing, and with bits of grass sticking out on each side of his mouth like whiskers, and said, Come on, you two, don't be shy. There's plenty for us all. But we don't eat grass, said Diggory. Said Fledge, speaking with his mouth full. Well, don't quite know what you'll do then. Very good grass, too. Polly and Diggory looked at one another in dismay. Well, I do think someone might have arranged about our meals, said Diggory. Sure, Aslan would have if you'd asked him, said Fledge. Wouldn't he know without being asked, said Polly. I've no doubt he would, said the horse, still with his mouth full. But I have a sort of idea he likes to be asked. But you asked Diggory. I'm sure I don't know, said Fledge. Unless you try the grass, you might like it better than you think. Don't be silly, said Polly, stamping her foot. Of course humans can't eat grass any more than you could eat a mutton chop. For goodness sake, don't talk about chops and things to Diggory. It only makes things worse. You want to finish out?
Diggory said that Polly had better take herself home by ring and get something to eat there. He couldn't himself, because he had promised to go straight on his message for Aslan. And if once he showed up again at home, anything might happen to prevent his getting back. But Polly said she wouldn't leave him, and Diggory said it wasn't jolly decent. It was jolly decent. I say, said Polly, I've still got the remains of that bag of toffee in my jacket. It'll be better than nothing. A lot better, said Diggory, but be careful to get your hand into your pocket without touching your ring. This was a difficult and delicate job, but they managed it in the end. The little paper bag was very squashy and sticky when they finally got it out, so it was more a question of tearing the bag off the toffees than of getting the toffees out of the bag. Some grown-ups, you know how fussy they can be about that sort of thing, would rather have gone without supper altogether than eaten those toffees. There were 9 of them all told. It was Diggory who had the bright idea of eating 4 each and planting the 9th. For as he said, if the bar off the lamppost turned into a little light tree, why shouldn't this turn into a toffee tree? So they dibbled a little small hole, the piece of toffee. Then they ate the other pieces, making them last as long as they could. It was a poor meal, even with all the paper. They couldn't help eating as well. When Fledge had quite finished his own excellent supper, he lay down. The children came and sat, one on each side of him, leaning against his warm body. And when he had spread a wing over each, they thought they were really quite snug. As the bright young stars of that new world came out, and they talked over everything, how Diggory had hoped to get something for his mother, and how instead of that, he had been sent on this message. And they repeated to one another all the signs by which they would know the places they were looking for, the blue lake, and the hill with a garden on top of it. The talk was just beginning to slow down as they got sleepy, when suddenly Polly sat up, wide awake, and said, Hush. Everyone listened as hard as they could. Perhaps it was in the trees, said Diggory presently. I'm not so sure, said Fledge. Anyway, wait, there it goes again. By Aslan, it is something. The horse scrambled to its feet with a great noise and a great upheaval. The children were already on theirs. Fledge trotted to and fro, sniffing and whinnying. The children tiptoed this way and that, looking behind every bush and tree. They kept on thinking they saw things, and there was one time when Polly was perfectly certain she had seen a tall, dark figure gliding quickly away in a westerly direction. But they caught nothing, and in the end, Fledge lay down again, and the children re-snuggled, if that's the right word, under his wings. They went to sleep at once. Fledge stayed awake much longer, moving his ears to and fro in the darkness, and sometimes giving a little shiver with the skin, as if a fly lighted on. And he too slept. Well,
I want to keep reading.
I know. How many?
For 3 more
Yeah,
chapters.
we finish next week.
We will. So we'll hope. Well, again, if you're watching kind of in time, it'll be Christmas. We have celebrated Christmas. It'll be the 4th day of Christmas? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
You got me. Yeah.
Yeah. Celebrate the 4th day of Christmas.
A week from tonight.
Celebration of
Finish this.
Finishing the book.
Fantastic book. Had you read this one like a long time ago?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much I don't remember.
Yeah. It is. It's a lot like actually reading it for the first time, which,
The treat.
it is. It is. Something about fiction, maybe don't remember as well reading
Yeah.
the details, because they're so good.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't think I could read The Hiding Place again.
Mm-hmm.
The details may be new, but you just wouldn't be like reading it the first time. For me, maybe. I don't know either.
I've read that one a lot.
Yeah. That's right. All right. Well, thank y'all.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
It is truly a gift. We'll kind of keep.
That's right. Good night. Peace to you.